and welcome to Mime Radio. I'm Karen Hoyer.
And I'm James Donlin with Mime Radio. And let me introduce our man behind the curtain, the man that pulls the buttons, pushes the buttons, pulls the cords, and plugs in the plugs, Michael Diaz, our production manager. There he is. He's also the curator of the Mime Radio Museum. And we're looking forward to something more about that later in the program. Today, we have some very special guests, one of which I've known since 1973 on the Mime streets of New York City. But that's another story that perhaps we'll get into. So let me tell you about the Chameleons. This is Keith Berger and Sharon Diskin from the San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles area. The Chameleons have performed as a mime theater duo since 1985, delighting a wide range of concert audiences throughout the world. Sharon and Keith have been enthusiastically received by audiences and critics alike at theater venues ranging from New York City's La Mama to LA's Disney Concert Hall, from the world-renowned Edinburgh Arts Festival to the Macau Cultural Center. The Chameleons have performed for over 1 million children and adults across the globe. This is very special, this next identity or aspect about them. Their focus as arts educators is primarily aimed at K through 12 students and their teachers. The Chameleons' mission is to impart the magical storytelling aspects of this ancient art form, mime, and in doing so, capture the imaginations of a new generation and teach them how to create performed work that is at once vivacious, resonant, and beautiful. So let us welcome the Chameleons. And there they are.
Welcome, Sharon and Keith. We're so glad that you're on with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. We're really happy to be here.
So we like to start off with this question about when you first go on stage. What's in your mind? Like, what do you say to yourself, or what do you think? And what's that moment right before the show starts? So maybe Keith, you want to answer first?
I'd like to defer to Sharon and have
I'd like to defer to Keith
Hey.
and have him answer first.
All right, so I'm a little weird in this respect, and I think after all these years, what I realize about myself is if I prep before I go on stage in the usual way that an actor preps or a performer preps, and there are some performers that really do a lot of things. They have this whole ritual of things they do, and I've seen them, and it's pretty cool. But for me, I just like to kind of daydream or get lost and then suddenly focus. And that's what I do. So I'm not really concentrating or thinking anything in particular. I'm sort of unfocused. And then suddenly I pull all the focus together and start. That's how.
Does that happen at the actual moment when you're stepping out onto the stage?
Definitely.
So does it have to do with your being connected to the audience at that moment?
Yes, I think when I'm in the wings, I just have this distinction. And it's funny, when I tell students about this who haven't performed, they don't get it really because they haven't had the, and you're in the wings and you're in your social reality still. You're in another world. But when you go onto the stage, everything starkly changes, and you step into pretend land. And so that's what happens to me. It just is like it has become over the years a habit, it just automatically happens, even if I'm really tired. Yeah.
What about you, Sharon? What do you think about?
Yeah, well, what he just said certainly resonates with me about that sort of the invisible not the fourth wall, because that separates you from the audience, but the invisible wing wall, where you go from, um, pedestrian life to performing life. You walk through that invisible wall. And I think it's different if I'm trying a new piece or we have a new show to do. That's very different from doing shows that we've done many, many times that you can do in our sleep, because that's kind of automatic. But really, our preps are very different, probably polar opposite. I get very practical and very organized and precise about everything off stage. And then when I go on stage, I'm in that, other dimension. And so we've learned over the years really to let each other have our space, our own ways of prepping. Although we can be really silly off stage up to the second we walk onto the stage. But I'm not going to tell you what we're silly about.
Oh, come on.
But, Sharon, do you have to focus Keith at some points, or do you trust that his magic is there? You don't worry about him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have to focus him in life. He's the consummate professional, but he's brilliant. We have done, literally thousands of shows together, and I still stand off stage and watch him from the wings and am in awe. I swear, still.
Fantastic. Do you guys peek at the audience before you go on?
Sometimes, yeah.
Used to peak more than I do now. I peak now. I just want to see that somebody's there.
I can relate with that.
Most of your performances are for young people, for young audiences. So, are you typically like in a wide open gym, or are you usually in a school auditorium? Or are you in a professional auditorium? What are your stages like?
It varies. Sometimes mostly we're in a regular school auditorium, and sometimes they take them to a professional auditorium, and once in a while we're in a gym, which is difficult, but we do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know before, in the early years, you guys were doing lots of different kinds of performances for adults on cruise ships, and I know Keith toured for many years in the colleges and other venues, proscenium type theaters. Is there any difference in the preparation between working for young people and working for the ragamuffin adult population that you might encounter?
Yeah, we have more props, and we have sound cues and lighting cues and stuff like that for the more regular adult venues. For kids, we work our own sound from the side of the stage. We found that works the best. We use an iPhone, and we use a JBL speaker, and we run back and forth and do the cues, and then run back up on stage, and it works really well.
Don't you feel that's the mime world? Is the artist who works as a mime feels this ability or need to be a minimalist and to actually be in control of your environment in many ways? It's you're creating from all angles. You're not relying on a lot of other technical people or other objects or forces for the success of your performance.
Yes, and that is particularly true in performing for children, because children do like colorful sets and props and things, but if you can deliver the goods as a mime, just your body, your hands and your face with very few props, kids will go anywhere with you. And back to your earlier question about do we prepare differently? So I think you meant maybe in terms of our focus before performing for a children's audience as opposed to adult. I think kids will, we all know this. Kids will let you know the instant they're bored. And that can come pretty quickly if you don't know how to begin your show and grab them and then sustain them. So I think for kids, in a way, you have to be even sharper. You cannot let your focus lag for one moment with kids, because you can feel them drifting away.
Mm-hmm.
And what do they represent, that audience? Is that a group of individuals to be dominated, to be nurtured, to be educated, to be informed, to be shocked? Like, how do you perceive that audience? You know, whether it's adults or kids, there's probably a difference perhaps, but.
They want to be taken on a journey, I guess, like any audience, but they really do. And kids love their own imagination. And if you can, this art form is one in which you engage the imagination. You know, they're coloring everything in as you're doing it. And they're imagining they're making all kinds of inferences. And this is what kids love to do. What they don't want ever is for you to explain anything.
Mm.
They want no explanation. They want to be taken on this journey, and do not interrupt and do not teach me anything. And that's the way kids are.
But this is enriching for you as an artist, isn't it? This, knowing that your audience is so rich in their imaginations, it allows you to be free yourself, I would think.
Yeah.
And to feel that you have a place in the universe as a performer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I was just going to say that aspect of working with kids in the schools, because my company, Partners in Mime, was a touring in the schools. It started about the same time as you did, and I did it for about 15 years. So it's a good chunk of my career. But the thing that was so interesting to me is that the kids would be so noisy and so wild while the teachers were saying, everybody settle down, we're going to have this performance. And as soon as we came out and weren't talking, they were so concentrated and so pulled in, because there were no words they're so used to having words.
Yeah. And in fact, we don't like it when the teachers calm them down and say no talking or anything. We just leave the kids alone. We'll do it. Don't worry. You know.
Are you ever dissatisfied with a young person's performance, like you might be with an adult performance? I know we all have, thoughts about, well, what was that like, performing at some situation, but, for adults. But do kids ever leave you with a feeling of, whoa, what happened? Or did I succeed? Or did their imaginations, were they triggered? What?
Okay, go ahead.
You mean after seeing a show?
No, I'm just saying, with adult performances, you can have, I don't know an artist who doesn't feel angst sometimes after a performance in terms of, was I successful? Did I get through to them? They were too quiet. Nobody laughed, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just saying, with a children's audience or a young person's audience, does that feeling come about as often as it might with adults or not?
No, it doesn't come about as often at all, wouldn't you say,
Yes,
Sharon?
I agree.
But here's when it does come, and not always. There are areas of the country where it's what I call it a school for the overprivileged. And so these kids come in completely jaded. They are handed, it's often a private school, and they're just handed everything they want. And they can't really sit through anything, really. I mean, they get bored. There's just nothing you can do to entertain them or to draw them in. I mean,
well, I would say,
yeah,
they're with you when you're actively, when we're doing a piece, let's say, but if there is the slightest lag in transition, which a non-overly privileged audience would be fine with, because there is a natural sort of negative space between action. That kind of audience that he's talking about, they're so used to having the next exciting thing happen without having to wait. Mm-hmm. So that's when they'll check out.
Mm-hmm. Mm. It doesn't always happen with that audience, but once in a while. Yeah.
But I mean, kids, I mean, to your question, James, of course, we end a show and think like, how do you think that went? I don't know. think that went because there's like a weird quiet or something. But you know, you never know. You just have to do your best. But what I love about kids is that you can be in their, you know, stain-ridden cafetorium, you know, those old spaces that were half auditorium, half cafeteria. So they're sitting on the floor, the curtains are ripped and stained, and you smell the tater tots wafting in from the kitchen next door because the lunch ladies are making lunch. And they don't care. They don't care about any of that. If you're good, they go on the journey with you and you can take them anywhere. And, you know, one just little cute story that I've told before is we got to the end of one of our shows that we perform called Adventures in Space. And it's a show about two school-age children that daydream themselves into outer space and they save the universe from the evil giant space dude. And the audience has to help save the boy, space cadet, from being sucked into the black hole. So we teach them the rope. And at one point, the girl, tells the audience, you know, grab hold of your rope. This is a play that we actually speak in portions of. And, you know, we teach them how to do it. And then when they get the cue, they pull the boy out of the black hole. And we finish the show, you know, everything, you know, everyone lives happily ever after. And then we're on stage doing a Q&A, which we always do after our shows. And a little boy, he was probably first grade, raised his hand with a little worried look in his eyes. And he stood up and he said, "Can I let go of the rope now?"
Oh my God, that's wonderful.
Is the power of the imagination. He was still there and he didn't want to let go of that rope because if he did, the boy might get sucked into the black hole.
Okay, here's a question for Keith. So let's talk about the beginnings of this magic power that both of you have. So Keith, can you tell us a little bit about you know, how you were influenced, you know, and you're coming up as a young person and how you came to Mime. And here you are, what, almost 50 years later, still doing it. Yeah.
Thanks, James. Yeah. I was in high school and doing, you know, I was a bright kid, but I was doing really badly. My parents were sort of absent, and I, you know, had some questionable friends, and I think, and I know what saved my life was drama. I had drama, and it was a tier of drama 1, drama 2, drama 3. And then if you got accepted, you got into this thing called play production, where you stayed every day after school till 6 o'clock. And the woman who ran this was a bit of a tyrant, you know, and just an old theatrical hag, but we loved her. We loved her to pieces, even though she was even cruel with us sometimes. And she directed us in some very quality stuff. And one day we had this festival to do, and she said, "I want you to come up with a mime piece." And so I had never thought of that. But then I thought, you know, what I really liked as a kid was Red Skelton, you know, the performer Red Skelton. And what really got me, and I never forgot this, was a piece that Red Skelton did. And I remember I was 5 years old, where he got knocked in the chin by some punch and he went through one wall and then another wall. And it was so funny to me as a 5-year-old kid seeing this on TV that I couldn't sleep that night. And this is what I want to do. Punch people through walls and go through walls myself, you know, and have people see me. I can't stop thinking about it. So it just kind of got to me when she asked, I don't know why she asked me to do this mime piece, but she did. And so I created this mime piece about a boxer who fights an imaginary opponent and gets hit. And I don't remember it exactly, but it actually, I did it in the festival and did quite well with it. And
Did she ask you to do this because you were athletic or quiet or both, do you think? To do a mime, to create a mime, because you said it surprised you. I'm just wondering, what do you think she saw in you? She said, this guy, Keith Berger, can do this mime.
Yeah, you might be onto something with the quiet thing because I was very quiet. So I didn't think about it. I don't know. I never asked her why she chose me. I guess she probably thought I was quiet, and I think she liked the way I moved on stage. And so, and for some reason, she also knew I could come up with my own piece.
Mm.
And that was the thing too.
Now, this was in North Hollywood, or what part of the LA? Because you grew up in LA area, like I did. Where exactly was this? Chrysalis.
Part of the valley called Sherman Oaks, but my high school, Grant High School, was in, I think it's considered North Hollywood. Yeah.
So, Keith, had you seen any mime performances at that point?
No.
No. You just knew that mime was performing without using words.
And that you used invisible things and invisible things. And
what would have been your role model besides Red Skelton? I mean, when she said, "Let's do a mime," Keith.
Yeah.
Did Red Skelton come to your mind, or Marcel Marceau, or somebody else, Richmond Shepard? Who would have come to your mind so you know, oh, I can start from this place?
Let's see. Well, Red Skelton, Charlie Chaplin.
Charlie Chaplin.
Mm-hmm.
And Stan Laurel, especially Stan Laurel. I mean, I would be glued to, the TV whenever there was, they used to play Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chaplin, but more Laurel and Hardy. And I really loved Stan Laurel. I mean, just everything he did, moment for moment, I was just transfixed on, he was very inspiring to me. And so, and deep down, I knew from those silent films, that's what I wanted to do somehow. I wanted to do that. I knew that I couldn't do it anymore, but
Where did this lead you then? Did you study theater in college?
Well, then I went and I auditioned for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, and I got in, and there was a mime class, which I was really happy about, and it was taught by Paul Curtis of the American Mime Theater. And his style of mime, of course, was really different. By that time, I had seen Marcel Marceau, but Paul was really, really different from Marceau.
In what way?
Marceau was very lyrical in his movement. It was all predicated on invisible objects in an invisible world, whereas Paul's vision of this was everything was very staccato and intense and in intention, and it was based on method acting techniques. He was a strong method actor, so that you use those method acting techniques with this tension on your body, which he called form, to create characters and interplay between the characters and create symbols. And so that opened up a whole new world to me. The next, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, was the work itself more, would you say, more abstract than the sort of the concrete bip mimes of Marceau?
Yes, a lot more abstract. What he would call it an extension of reality rather than abstract, but it was much more abstract than.
Now, I know both of you, both Sharon and Keith, you've both studied at the American Mime Theater for a period of time, which was really influenced you. So Sharon, going back before that time, where did you begin? Where was your source of interest in physical theater and performance?
Yes. Well, I mean, I can mark my childhood as my original inspiration to go into physical theater and mime by watching Charlie Chaplin movies, for sure. You know, you don't know these things are really important to you until you're much, much older. But, you know, I can definitely say that Charlie Chaplin was a huge influence. I don't think I saw any other silent film comedians, well, other than Lucille Ball. And the I Love Lucy show, because she was phenomenal and I loved her and she was hysterical and she was a physical comedian, very groundbreaking, especially in the area of women physical comedians. But I loved Charlie Chaplin. I think I laughed harder. We went to the movie theater to see one of his silent movies. I think it was Modern Times. Yeah, it was a double feature, Modern Times and City Lights. And I laughed harder than I've ever laughed in my life. And then I had my mom get out the huge Super 8, what was it called? Super 8 projector and the big lights. This was many, you know, way before even camcorders. And I made my own Charlie Chaplin variety show. So I was Charlie Chaplin and I did my routine. And then I did sprinkle in a little Samantha Stevens. Does anybody know this reference? From Bewitched, Elizabeth Montgomery, who was a witch, the original witch. And so I did some magic tricks with the camera where I would hold still and then we'd shut the camera off and I'd walk out and then we'd start the camera again. So like primitive forms of video, you know, special effects. Anyway, you know, and at the time I just thought this is fun, you know, okay. Then throughout school, middle school and high school, I did a ton of theater. We did have a mime troupe in my 8th grade middle school drama class. And that's really did my first mime plays.
And this is in the Phoenix area, correct? Where you grew up?
I mean, in those days, the drama teachers were very serious. Yeah, I mean, I apologize to any drama teacher that's watching this right now because there are many wonderful drama teachers now, but I think just the field of being a drama teacher in middle and high school was taken more seriously then. So you had these really serious people, and she was a serious, you know, kind of hard teacher, my 8th grade drama teacher, and she developed this mime troupe with us. And I think I had the only solo in it where I played the hunter and the hunted, you know, going behind the screen, that sort of piece. And we toured to elementary schools, you know, a few of them anyway. But I was always in straight theater. I mean, you know, past that experience, I did a lot of speaking theater, a lot of musicals in high school, and then and a lot of community theater too. And I'd say my two most influential roles for me as an artist, as a young artist, I had the opportunity in community theater to play Anne Frank in The Diary of Anne Frank and Peter Pan. And when I look back on all the shows that I did, I think those two roles were seminal for me. They are both children. They both never grew up. One didn't want to grow up. The other wasn't allowed to grow up. They were, you know, opposites in certain ways, but I think really shared a lot of very deep characteristics with each other. Anne Frank will forever be etched in our minds as a child, and with all the angst and joy that goes into being a child. Same with Peter Pan. And I think it's not a coincidence that I've spent now the greater part of my adult performing life performing for children and teaching children, because I think in a way I never grew up. And maybe playing those roles set me on my path. And that's the joy of working with kids and adults. I mean, to teach what we do, to teach mime, even to adults, is to remind people of what it's like to play.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Do you feel, this is a question for either one of you. So I was an only child, and I filled my time with imagination and space outdoors, especially growing up in the 50s. So do you feel, it sounds like perhaps these formative years, maybe perhaps even being an only child or in a place where you can roam in your mind and in space contributes to one finding the mime art. I don't know what are your feelings about that?
Um, well, I wasn't an only child, so I'm not sure I don't know quite how to answer that, but I was in my own space as a kid.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's my point. This idea, this being having the privilege of being alone when you wanted to be, and being able to fly in your mind. That's what I'm
definitely.
getting at.
Yeah, I think if you're like that, you're a prime target for going into a profession like this. And I always used to think I'm different from other people, because of that,
Yeah.
my own space a lot, in my own head a lot, and this whole world. And, you know, I did have that urge to express it, I have to say, and express it in a way on stage.
What keeps one from becoming too insular? Like the mime art, you're naked on stage. It's your body most of the time,
Yeah.
time and space,
Yeah.
and you're manufacturing the images of fantasy and imagination,
Right.
whether your intention is political or social consciousness. But what keeps one this insular kind of living in your own head? What keeps one from staying there and never departing into the physical side enough to go before an audience?
Well, to me, it's really interesting what you said about that connection you guys have with your childhood, this ability to play, and that playing, it really connects you to the kids, but maybe also helps with what James is talking about.
Yeah. There's lots of people that live in their heads, but what makes them become a mime? Like in your cases, what drove you to express physically in the physical theater sense?
Good question. Yeah.
well, well, I think a lot of introverted people or people that you have extremely rich imaginations as children and that feel like they don't really belong in the social world. They kind of don't know how to do it like other people know how to connect. I think a lot of those people go into the arts, whether it's mime. I think what makes you find the art for you first is luck. I mean, you have to be exposed to it, right? So
But what makes you become physical? That's my question.
well,
Why choose to be a physical artist, a performing artist? What is that?
yeah, for me, I did a lot of speaking theater. But it wasn't until the moment that I did my first real mime performance, which was in the workshop where I met Keith. He was my teacher first, and it was a workshop that I took at Oberlin College, an intense month-long mime workshop. And at the end of this mime workshop, we did a performance. And up until that point, I had done, many shows, traditional theater, speaking theater, musical theater, what have you, very traditional. And, everybody around me was sort of pointing me in that direction. Like, of course, Sharon's going to be an actress. She's going to, do the mainstream acting thing. And then I had this experience with Keith where he taught me what mime was. And I had seen Marceau in person and liked it, liked what he did, really appreciated his skill and his artistry, but it did not speak to me in the way that it spoke to me when I did my workshop with Keith. I think the different philosophy of mime just, it just spoke to me in a different way. And when I performed a piece in that show called Feline, where it's about two cats mating. And it's a very intense, very sensual and then at the end, sexual without, derobing. But it's a very intense piece. And that was the first moment that I felt how deeply you could connect with an audience without saying a single word, through your movement and through your face. And I have always been a very physical person. James, you and I have talked about that. That clicked for me. I thought, I don't need words. I'm kind of tired of words. This is communication that transcends the spoken word. Not to knock words, but it spoke to me. And that was it. I never looked back.
Well, perhaps I was going to say that, you both are expressing this rich childhood of imagination, and you perform for kids, mostly now professionally, but the idea of being a kid is a physical notion. If you're a kid, you're physical.
Right.
So it seems to me, if you have kept this playfulness, this childlike quality, that obviously you will be physical, and through your whole lifetime. So maybe that's the answer to why one becomes physical entering the mime form.
Here's another take on it. And I know there are male dancers, for example, who have told me the same thing. For example, I was somewhat athletic as a kid, but I loved playing, but I was really, really anti-competitive. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't see the point in competition. It's not that I hated it, it's just I didn't see the point.
Was there stress involved? I know with me, I was quite athletic, but the competition eventually stressed me out because I had to conform to a certain behavior that was somewhat uncomfortable by my nature,
And I found that too. And I just thought, okay, I don't want to mess with athletics unless I really have to, or if I'm having fun with some friends playing football or something like that. But then I started to discover you can be athletic and not have to compete, really. And that was a really good feeling, use your body. Because I could do certain things. For example, in high school, I had I remember this guy clear as a bell. He was a sadist, and he hated anybody who was not one of his gymnastics team, and he would sneer at us and challenge us to do stuff. And once we were all sitting there, and we're sitting down, and he points at me, he says, "Berger, I want you to climb that rope all the way up to the ceiling. And if you don't, you get an F," or some deal, where it would have been totally humiliating. God. And he said, yeah. And he said, "You may not use your feet." And I never did it. That was the first time they hung that rope, and it was like really high up. And lo and behold, now it might have been because I was really skinny, but I climbed that rope like I just shot up to the top. And I thought, wow, I did that, Other guys tried it and they couldn't do it, but I did it. And I just thought, I must be pretty good. And that teacher he turned red. He was so mad at me.
Because you walked out the door, you came down, you looked at him in the eye, and you just walked out the door. That's a good story. I was going to say, Keith, you should make a piece about that. That's a great story, a great lesson for kids and adults alike. Go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to say, I want to hear the end of the story, because we've sort of brought the two of you up to a point where you've discovered your in mind. But how do you meet? And Sharon, you already mentioned a little bit that you in his class, but how did you become, life partners and creative partners?
In a nutshell, tell it, in 3 sentences or less.
You want me to have a crack?
Sure, go ahead.
You're pretty good at it. But.
I'm gonna get my dice out. I'm gonna roll the dice. You know, so
Thing that's stressing me out. You got to put it in a nutshell. No,
no, it's up to you.
Completed the last of our mime workshops, and I sort of said to Sharon, well, you know, why don't we perform together, you know?
Wow. Just like that, huh?
And why don't we become boyfriend and girlfriend? And why don't you come with me to New York? And it happened.
Wow. Run away with a circus. Run away with a mime, Sharon.
It was just like that. And she did. And about a week later, we got a gig on a cruise ship. And we we come up with all kinds of material for that. So it was, I think that got us started.
Yeah.
That's in a nutshell. There's much more to it.
That's a good story.
Really good details, but some good details, but that'll be for the after hours interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to a little later. Maybe I want to talk. I want to hear the blue people story, like a unique touring experience.
Right.
But maybe now, how do you guys? And we've been talking about mime and backgrounds and and performance flavors. Like, how do you define what you do? Like, how have you defined your mime art? How do you define it now? How did you define it maybe when you guys met? How did you define it, Keith, when you first stepped out in the streets in New York to perform?
I think after studying with Paul, I developed a kind of hybrid between the usual, because I studied also with Claude Kipnis and a little bit with Richmond Shepard.
Mm.
But more, I think I was influenced by Claude Kipnis, who is more traditional, more like Marceau, more of a streamlined Marceau. And so I did a hybrid between Paul's style and Claude Kipnis. And I think what I really like about Paul and what I've always incorporated, and Paul used to tell me, I moved, if of anybody he'd seen at the Mime Theater, I was the closest to the way his vision of movement was. And I know what he means. So as a kid, I used to walk around literally like this, in tension. And I don't know why I did that. And that just suited me to.
What do you mean? What do you mean? You were like,
I was always.
You had intentions and goals, so your physicality was
tension.
Never
tension. I took it that you were ready to eat the menu. Like, okay, so go ahead.
This guy, and finally, I found this art form where you use tension and you move in this tension, and that was Paul's style. It's like a constant isometric movement, and I loved it. And you have to relax into it, but it just suited me perfectly. And I sort of married that to regular work with Claude Kipnis and Richmond Shepard, and just sort of molded the two together. And I would say that typifies my personal style. And I think when I saw Sharon on the first day of our first workshop, I said, well, she's just like me. She's not a female me. She's very different, but she moves that same way. She has that tension in her body, and it's electric. She was like an electric cat. And I just thought, wow, I have not seen that in anybody else except for me.
Did you say electric cat?
Yeah, like an electric cat.
That's a great, what a term. Well, I'm never going to look at you the same, Sharon, after that.
That's wonderful. An electric cat. Yeah. So in terms of like your style, this sort of tension, relaxed inner, outer tension, and partly abstract, partly concrete, but like, what do you think is the purpose of the art form? Like, what, in terms of your definition, why mime?
Because why would we do it that way? Is that
Why would you do mime?
do you?
Well, I mean, I think it's the purest form of communication. And when you're communicating as an artist on stage with an audience, the idea that you can, I mean, you can say this about music. Music is a nonverbal form of communication, but it's oral. Mime is visual. But that idea, it's universal. You don't have to speak the same verbal language to understand what's happening on stage. And there is, studies have shown that in the 70% range of communication every day is nonverbal. We think of communication as being verbal, but really the vast majority of our communication is nonverbal. And if you can put that thing into form, into a physical form that is both exciting to watch, skillful, dynamic, and even beautiful in the way a dancer is beautiful and dynamic, but you're not performing to music, you're not, or, to a rhythm, you are communicating a story to the audience. It's like magic, and it's hard to do well. It's really hard to do well. And that's why there need to be more mime teachers in the world. Because when it's done well,
it's very immersive.
On this incredible journey, and they leave going like, I never knew that existed. I never knew I could feel this way coming from that art form, from that performer who's conveying this form of communication with me. It's just like magic.
Well, it's very immersive, isn't it? Physically and emotionally. You can't be a mime without the emotional intentions and depth that Keith was talking about, and this in conjunction with physicality. And that's exhausting. And a lot of people can't do that. They can't equally enter the psychological and the physical on this, in an equal plateau. Right. And I think that is what makes it difficult for most people.
On the other hand, that's also the thing that's so rewarding about it for me.
Absolutely.
Is this very intense feeling that you have, that you are directly connected to the audience and you're sharing this experience. That's so fulfilling.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, you're using your whole being, right? You're using every tip of your body and every tip of your mind to do this art form. And it's cathartic. It's amazing.
But how do you keep doing it when we get older?
Yeah, good
you
question.
You have to make adjustments to your performing life as we get older.
What I think is, for me, more and more one needs to get into storytelling, that the story is king. It used to be that the physicality is king. And abstraction is king. But now, to get around doing a bit less physically, storytelling is king for me.
And that happens naturally with aging, I think. I think the elder can tell a good story, and you learn to take the physical and put it in its more economical place the older you get. I think that's natural,
Exactly. I think you learn to minimize more and to distill the movement down to its essence.
Yeah.
I think when we're young, we tend to work hard physically because we feel like we're being really productive. Look at all this sweat. And I spent 8 hours in the studio trying to perfect the umbrella illusion. But really, and some of that early on is necessary, but really what you learn as you get older is to minimize, constantly edit it down to its primary essence. The essence is the thing. And that actually helps you physically as you get older, I think. You don't waste all that movement.
So would you say it's easier on your body now? The older a mime gets, the easier it is in terms of wear and tear on your body?
I mean, yes, but if you're doing some of your old pieces that were, some of the pieces I used to do solo, There's just no way it would kill me.
Yeah.
It would literally kill me.
Oh,
Ah.
I hear something.
Well, hello. It's time for a little present from the Mime Museum. We hope that you received a gift that we sent.
We did.
So
Did we open it?
it's time for you to open that.
Yes, please. That's the one. That should be the one.
Okay. Here we
You'll
go.
be getting another one next week and the week after also.
Yes, it's actually a subscription service. You'll be billed on a regular basis for the rest of your life.
Tell us what the card says or what the information says, if there is any.
Okay. There's no card in there.
Oh.
Well, there'll
I
be
just
some.
have to unwrap it and see if there's something in there.
That's straight here.
Oh. Oh, there it is.
Very fancy wrapping.
Okay.
Show it. Oh.
It's the Mime Museum. Souvenir 53115Q. Description: this makeup tin contains portions of the spotlight swept up by Emmett Kelly during a Ringling show at Madison Square Garden in 1952. Do not expose to light. Oh my God. That is amazing. Okay, now I'm going to open it.
Yeah, be careful. Don't let the thing escape when you open that. tin.
Yeah. The inside of the, should I read the inside of the card?
Sure.
Thank you for joining us on Mime Radio. Please accept this gift from the Mime Museum collection as a token of our thanks. Hosted by Karen Hoyer and James Donlin, Michael Diaz, producer, curator. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So
Don't open it.
I'm not
right?
going to open it. It's in here.
Yeah.
It's in there. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You know, maybe late at night, and you can put it on your bed table and you can kind of let it crack a bit and you can sort of feel the light in the room, and could
That
be
is-
very romantic, maybe,
Very cool.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Our curator of the Mime Museum is deacquisitioning his things, so you're the lucky recipient.
Well,
We're
blessed.
honored.
Hey, do you guys have any disaster stories about your adventures as traveling mimes? Anything spring to mind?
What on the
Yeah, any disaster stories or maybe unique experiences?
of a disastrous?
Well, here's my disaster story. I was
Yeah.
I have several actually. One,
Yeah.
okay. Since Michael Diaz is, what city is Athens, Georgia? No, not Athens, Georgia.
Athens, Ohio.
There is a town, I don't think it's far from Athens, it's called
Defiant.
Defiance, Ohio? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I don't think you've heard this one, James. So in the 70s, I do these teasers. You know what a teaser is? It's you go into the cafeteria and
Of a college.
and you do 5 minutes of stuff, that, and everybody talks and comes to the show, and it really worked well. So
Those were the days. Oh, those were the days.
enthusiastic, but there was this college, and I'm pretty sure it was Defiance, because I remember that name because it was this thing that happened was Defiant. So I'm doing this sort of robot character in there, and nobody had ever seen that. In those days, nobody had ever seen anything like that. And these tough sort of kids, these thick, tough guys, came over and started joking with me. And some of the black kids were saying, no, leave them alone. This is good. and they were sort of at odds with each other. And one of the tough guys, I'm standing there, he comes over and takes a fork and stabs me. And I sort of
Oh,
moved,
as the robot, you're moving as the robot, and the guy stabs you.
and I managed to hold it together. And a scuffle broke out where I was kind of like the catalyst between the tension between the black kids and these white kids, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. But they thought that the black kids were very protective of me. And when I did my show, they had a group of them camped out on the foot of my stage. They all had McDonald's and were eating it on the foot of my stage. And nobody was telling them to leave. And the whole audience came in and it was packed, you know. But there were these guys there waiting to, you know, to punch anybody out who dared come in contact with me and me. And
Eating their McDonald's, eating their food.
McDonald's, and they're watching the show and watching the audience at the same time. And there are about 20 of them around
Wow.
the stage. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that I remember because Defiance, Ohio, you know.
Fits, right?
Yeah.
I have a question about your creative process, about how you create work. And so you're working in the schools and you're creating new work for the kids. You have a lot of a repertory, but how do you work together in creating a piece together? Like, how is one of you the director, one of you the idea person? Do you collaborate? Do you brainstorm? And where do those ideas come from?
Well, for the pieces that we do together, generally Keith comes up with the initial idea.
And then she changes it completely.
Yeah,
She turns it inside out and edits it. And
well, but in collaboration. So
Yeah.
it's like he comes up with the initial idea, then I take it and, you know, give my 2 cents. And then we both work together. And then, of course, in the studio, when we get it on our feet, it changes more, you know. But that's generally how it works when we're working together. I have some solo pieces that I've written, you know, and other types of pieces that I've written, and I'm in control of, you know, I not in control. I mean, I come up with those ideas for my, you know, for my own solo work. But generally when we work together, that's how it goes. And it's great. And I like being the second one, and, you know, who takes a pass over it. But Keith has a really wonderful imagination. And he, especially with our work for kids, he is very in touch with what excited him as a kid.
Yeah.
Not from an adult point of view, not from what adults think kids like.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the key. And I really trust him with that. And he's just come up with some wonderful ideas because he takes it from within him.
Do you guys create a new show every year, or 2 shows, or do you recycle material and add a few elements every year? How do you grow the work if that's important?
Yeah. Well, we perform every summer, except for last summer, the pandemic, at this wonderful performing arts camp in Long Island, New York. And they've had us every year as a guest artist performing on their performing arts series. They're very well endowed, so they can bring professional performers in to perform for the kids. And because we go there every summer, that's sort of our motivation to come up with at least one new piece. So to answer your question, yes, we will come up with a new piece every year. Does it stay in our repertoire? Not necessarily. You know, we have to kind of see which of the new pieces still resonate with us and still, you know, are just in tip-top shape to be performed. But the interesting thing is, you know, I'm sure you both can relate to this. When you do a piece for many years, it evolves and it generally I find gets better because you're older. You can play the characters more honestly. You don't have as much to prove. Your physicality gets, like we were saying, more kind of tighter, you cut out all the fat. So I really like performing some of our old pieces. I mean, to this day, over and over again for that reason. I don't really go stale with them.
Is there a danger of relying only on the greatest hits, or do you feel you must produce something new? Because I know a performer can get lazy and this has worked in the past and feels good and I'm gonna keep doing it. Do you like fight that urge, or is that just part of the mix?
Yeah, I think there's always that tension. Yeah, and I think it has to be there because otherwise you really don't grow as an artist. If you really just keep recycling the same stuff, or you change it, it evolves, like I was saying.
Do you have family rules? I'm sorry. Did you want to add to that, Keith?
Well, we've come up with a lot of new stuff over the years, but it's very inconsistent when we do it and why and how. I mean, there are no clear patterns to when it happens. Sometimes it's just abundant, and sometimes we're dry for a couple of years.
How do you like when you create a piece? Is there a standard procedure that you try to adhere to? In other words, okay, we got to spend a month with this. We got to try it out this amount of time. We got to make sure these elements are there. Do you have a kind of like a Chameleons manual that you adhere to when you create a piece, or is it all different depending on the piece? Does something come about in one day and another piece might take 2 months,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. It might take a day and it'll be great, and another will take 2 months and not so great.
We've spent 2 years on something.
Yeah.
Before even performing it.
Yeah.
But we did learn very early on in our professional lives together and personal life to have some procedures for working together. Because in the first couple of years we worked together,
we nearly killed each other.
Yes.
Really?
We nearly killed each other.
So it wasn't perfect pie from the beginning.
No. And
no, it was baptism by fire. It was really difficult.
Yeah. And I don't know how two people who are in a personal relationship and work professionally, how it can be perfect from day one. Because, especially in the arts, you have the artistic passions flowing and your ideas, and you have to work out a way to work together. So early on, after we realized we were really going to kill each other, we developed a set of procedures. In fact, it was 7. I don't remember all by memory, but essentially it had to do with how do we work together professionally and maintain our personal relationship. And we actually had to answer this question early on, which was we had to choose. Do we stay together as a couple and not work together professionally? Or do we split up personally and stay as a professional performing team? We didn't want either of those choices, so we made it work. Mm-hmm. Basically, it has to do with respect, but that's very nebulous. Okay, so you have to respect each other. How? So we came up with these nuts and bolts procedures. Number 1, you cannot bring your personal life into the studio when working professionally. You cannot bring your personal baggage in. And if anybody crosses the line, anybody can take a timeout, call a timeout. And then the other important rule we had was one of us needed to be the lead in every rehearsal, because then they're automatically given that respect and they can set the terms of the rehearsal. But those other things definitely had to be in place. Yeah, it worked, really worked for us.
So you did have a procedure, like you say, of things you had to make sure were present to.
A 1-page contract, and we had it for years. We stopped looking at it, but I don't know. I even still have it.
Yeah, we do.
We do.
I found it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I admire couples that can live together and work together, and I've always been curious. I always want to ask, how do you do it? And I think that kind of structure is pretty much always in place.
Yeah, for us, it was a must.
So now, obviously, you guys teach, or at least teach through the. I remember I was an affiliate artist at one point. I don't know if you know what that is, but there was this thing called the Informants, where it was a combination of a performance and a lecture and a workshop all in one, and you performed all over the country. But I know you guys teach, and I know you're doing it by Zoom right now. So how does that fit in your professional life, and what are your goals as a teacher to give to the kids?
Yeah, and also, like, Keith, you were talking about how you were touring in the colleges and probably teaching workshops, so that's how the two of you met. How is it different teaching college age and the teaching you do when you do a residency, like at a elementary school?
I'd say it's very different. I miss the older kids. You can do a lot more with them, and they're a lot better than the kids are. But the kids love it. I mean, they love it to pieces, even though they're not very good at it.
That's great.
But they love it, and it resonates with them, and it's very rewarding. I do miss the older kids and older performers, and whenever I get a chance to work with older people, I really enjoy it, because you can just do an infinite amount more with them than you can with kids.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an overriding philosophy as a teacher, how it fits with the mime art? You know, like, I feel that part of being a mime is to impart information and to hand down skills and knowledge from the elders, let's say. The older I get, the more I'm feeling that it's almost like a Zen thing. Like, you're a Zen teacher in a sense, like handing down these, mysterious forces of time and space.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. Do you have something similar to that you?
I do. We're actually, we got this idea, what's happened over the years is, there's this guy, I think his name is Alvin Toffler. He wrote this book called Future Shock. And his point, oh, you heard of it? And this is way back, I don't know, might have been the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
He said, in the future, everybody's going to think in terms of short blips.
Mm-hmm.
Words he used. And I thought, really? But it happened. Mm-hmm. So I have been thinking, like, for kids, they have been trained to think that way. So the longer formats for them aren't working as well as the short things. And so I thought, and it was actually initially Sharon's idea, why not produce a series of videos that are really short, like 10 minutes, that really impart all the secrets and beauty and playfulness of mime. And we'll have a whole 10-part series with just these short videos. So that's what we're working on right now.
That's a great idea. Great idea. Yeah.
Are they?
Oh. Oh no. What? Whoa. Put it out. Put it out. Put it out.
Ah, it's a fire.
Oh, it's time for rapid fire, guys.
Are you ready?
Mike, are you there? Did you get it out? Did you get that fire out? Good. So this is a special moment in the program, and it's called Rapid Fire. And this is where I will shout out one word in a list. And there's several words. It's not one word over and over in a list, but I have a list of words. And you are to, off the top of your head, as quickly as you can, respond with a verbal reaction, like it's word association. But because there's two of you, we thought that there should be a visual component too. So one of you can create a reaction verbally, and one of you, we would like, if you wish, to create an answer gesturally, however you want to do it. Okay. At the same time. So would you like to try this method of play?
All right. Do you have enough room to move around a little bit?
Yeah. Who's going to do the physical, you
Cap
think?
on.
Okay. Sharon's going to do the physical. Keith is going to do the verbal. All right. Now I'll try to manage this and watch carefully so I know when to give the next word. This is called rapid fire. This is the highlight, the hot highlight of our program. Okay.
What one word answer or something?
Yeah, you know, word association. If I say props, what do you say? Like stuff, or baggage, or not necessary, or you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so it could be more.
Yeah. If I say James, you say handsome. You know, something like that. Okay. All right, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, are you guys ready? You ready, Sharon? Okay, here we go. Spotlight.
Sun.
Nice. Hands.
Feet.
Eyes.
Orbs.
Fourth wall.
Glass.
Sweat.
Lather.
Child.
Else.
Elder.
Me.
Props.
Unnecessary. I think
Mask.
my usual face.
Age.
Old.
Failure.
The right way to be.
Critic.
Loose.
Teacher.
Asleep.
Fame.
Fleeting.
Language.
English.
Mime.
What we are.
Future.
Present.
And a riff on that. Now.
And then.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Rapid Fire by the Chameleons. Bravo.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
A little mini performance.
Yeah.
To all the way.
What's that?
Impromptu all the way.
Exactly. When you are out and about and people ask you, what is it that you do? How do you explain your life? How do you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
That was priceless. Yeah.
Mainly, I say I'm a mime artist because everybody responds well to it. You know, they think it's the coolest thing in the world. So.
And our kids, I didn't think this would happen, but our kids find that when they say their folks are mimes, people practically jump out of their skin. You know, it's like, you know, a really cool thing.
Isn't that interesting? Because for decades, mimes have struggled with what to call themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're apologetic, sometimes you're rebellious, sometimes you're trying to find another way to describe yourself.
Right.
But yet, when you say mime, people light up. It's what we just need to embrace that and just that's what we do.
Keith, that's so funny because I was always wondering whether my son and my daughter, whether what they thought about what I did.
Yeah.
And then I just happened to discover that they thought it was cool. And I was like, oh, good. All
Yeah.
this time I was kind of like, no.
I know, me too. But nowadays people think it's really cool, especially the young people.
What do you think? Why do you think that is? Why do you think they think it's cool?
Because it's
That-
like Paul Curtis said, mime goes in and out like tap dancing, right? Sometimes tap dancing is very, very cool, and then you don't hear about it for a while, and then suddenly tap dancing. Well, it's the same thing with mime.
And then you see the tap dancer, like you
Right.
see you see the old videos, or even now, and you're going like, "Whoa, what
Yeah.
a thing to be able to do!" You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think if you're in the performing arts, people are used to you being in one of the major categories. You know, I'm a musician, or I'm a visual artist, or a dancer. You know, when you're that specific, you know, because sometimes I'll just say, you know, I'm a theater artist or something. But when you're that specific, I don't think people are used to meeting people that can actually make a living doing something that specific.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so
Now-
that in and of itself, it doesn't have to be mime. It could be it could be underwater basket weaving, you know, but
Right.
very esoteric and even ancient that the person actually does for a living, that is really unusual. So I think that's partly why the younger generation thinks it's cool, because you know, it's kind of tough for them right now. You know, they have
Yeah.
to.
Do you have to qualify it? Do you have to say we don't necessarily perform at birthday parties or in the street? Or do people assume, or do they have a openness about them? You know,
Yeah,
to
once in a while they'll say, well, could you perform at a party? And we'll say, absolutely not. You know, we will not perform at a party.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're a little nicer than I'm nicer than that.
I'm not.
That was a good point you made, Sharon. Like, what do you think the pandemic has taught us in these times as mimes?
Yeah, there's like we had this moment of pause. Was there anything good about it?
Oh, for me, there was. I mean, being allowed to put the brakes on my everyday busy life. I mean, we're very fortunate in that we're also in a part of the country where there's a lot of work for us in Southern California. So we've always had enough work, knock wood. But to have the brakes put on and sort of be given a sabbatical, even though I've been doing a lot of Zoom teaching lately, which I've really enjoyed. But, you know, for the first several months, you know, we were making videos, but we weren't needing to go physically to places to work. So it was like a gift, like a sabbatical, where I could start thinking, reflecting on this art form and what it means to me. And we formed a group of 5 women mime artists, of which Karen and I are members. And that has been just a joy to share this art form with other people. And that would never have happened had we not had this forced sabbatical. You know, there were definitely some hard moments for me this year, but you know, that was the good part, is just being able to stop and think and reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys concerned about legacy?
I'm not.
Why?
I think that's probably my Achilles heel. I never really cared much about that. And sometimes I think I should, but I just think, you know.
What about the influence that you've had in a big way or a small way with the kids that you've performed with and taught over the years?
I just know we have. I just know it. You know, I know there were a number of times where there at least was one kid in that audience who will never forget, you know, and who will have been touched, because I was as a kid by certain things, live performances, and I know there are kids that are, touched in the same way by us, and I can see it in their eyes. So that's all I really need.
What advice would you give to these young people today as young aspiring performing artists or mimes? Because as Sharon said, this is a really difficult time for younger people who want to be performing artists. This last year has been horrible. It's been a nightmare.
Yeah, even in general, though, I mean, because right out of college, they need to make a good amount of money to afford their housing, rent.
Yeah, it wasn't, when we were younger, it was a little different in some ways.
Have a lot of time, you have to get a full-time job to pay your rent or your living situation.
You can't bum around like you used to,
Right.
So what advice would you give them to navigate those challenges and still keep their dream and their love of performing or creating?
Make it work. I mean, don't give up on it. If it really is a dream, don't give up on it, but do dispense with the notion that it has to be your career. Because I think as soon as you put that kind of expectation on yourself as a young person going into the arts, then if it's not your career, you feel like a failure. And some of the happiest people I know are people that have other professions that, were more secure ways to make a living, but still do their art. Mm-hmm. In addition to that. I'm not going to even say on the side. I don't like that way of framing it. Mm-hmm. But they are some of the happiest people I know because they let go of that notion that their art is going to be their identity and who I am as a person, and it's my profession. Mm-hmm. If it happens, fine, but get out that notion out of your head. You are an artist if you're an artist. It doesn't matter if you're making a living at it or not. Just do it and find the spiritual fulfillment from it.
Yeah, the riches come from within, don't they?
And, and the sad part, and this is the reason why I admire you for continuing to work with kids in the schools, is that many kids are not exposed to the arts. And so anybody that tours in the schools and brings the arts to the schools, that's sometimes the only way kids learn about music or dance or theater or mime.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's so important. And again, these kids don't, the vast majority aren't going to grow up to want to be mime artists or musicians even or something, but it sparks their imagination. It sparks their creativity. Mm-hmm. We're going to be doing a workshop in a month for employees of Google.
Oh, really?
Oh, great.
So, it's big corporate thing, but, good for them to spark the imagination of their employees by exposing them to an esoteric art form. And, that is where the gold is touching somebody spiritually and emotionally through an art, either as you, the artist, or the receiver of the art form. The goal should not be to become famous or to make a lot of money or make it your profession. If that happens and you want it, fine. But that should not be the goal. That's a very Western way of looking at it. And I think art should be something intangible.
So you're working on the 10 short studies of mime in video, and then you have this new world with the corporate entrance. These are exciting things. So is this something you want to do more of? Something you want to work on as you go forward?
The corporate thing, every once in a while we'll get asked to do something like that, but it's never been anything that we've pursued.
It sounds like these 10 lessons you were talking about could be expanded, or that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we should know about that it's coming, or where people can find something like that from you?
It's coming. I mean, that's another thing about this year and doing everything on Zoom is that you realize how mime really translates well on the screen. We have done a lot, I've had a lot of our shows videoed over the years, but it's always to capture the live experience. We've done very little studio video work, a bit, but not as much. And it really does translate well in this two-dimensional
If you do it
form,
right.
if you do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there is really a market, but more just an opportunity to, and speaking of legacy, you know, to capture what we do and the other marvelous mime artists that I've gotten to know this year, to capture what we do on video and whatever platform you put it out there on, you know, it can live in perpetuity. But you have to do it right. And I do think the short chunks is kind of the way to go, you know. And, you know, if you can just take the most salient parts of what you teach and chunk them up, make them into chunks. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to stop at 10. We can do 20. Going.
Fantastic. Okay, one last question. One last question before we go. What do you guys want to be when you grow up? You, Keith, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Writer.
Great. What about you, Sharon?
Yeah.
I would, you know, I've always been interested in everything. I can't nail it down. I mean, I do wish I could have other professions, but
She's a very good cook. Good.
but I'd hate to be a cook professionally. That's like down there with dental hygienist. Yes, I love
Well, we want to thank you guys for coming on today. And it's been really wonderful to hear from you. And we'll make sure that people know where to find you in the future. So thanks a lot, Keith and Sharon.
It's been
And,
a great conversation. I just
Yeah.
find your attitude and your relationship and your work very inspiring. Thank you for spending time with us.
Yeah, and I think in the future we can revisit you guys, but maybe one-on-one, you know, to get further into your lives and your work. So anyway, thank you very much.
You,
Yeah.
Karen and James and
Likewise,
Michael. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and congratulations on this new venture. I think
Yeah.
it's a really great thing for you to do. And I have a question: who's interviewing you?
Well, that's to be decided. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's Mime Radio Show with Sharon Diskin and Keith Berger, the Chameleons.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mime Radio Show. Join us in 2 weeks for a conversation with Bob Francisconi.